Okay, JB, let's get an update on this Corvette project. What's happening with the bodywork?
Well, we're down to the phase now where we're going to put a finishing glaze over the entire car, and what that does, it creates a new line.
Okay.
We talked about that in some other cars where you got all these lines for the doors inboard and the fenders outboard and that sort of thing.
Right.
And a lot of that factory stuff was common. There wasn't a very high standard in the 50s and 60s. It doesn't really matter what manufacturer you're talking about.
Okay.
People are just not as demanding in terms of fit and finish. So if the door sat outboard a little bit and the back fender sat inboard a little bit, nobody really cared.
Okay.
So nowadays, of course, that's all changed. And so we got to bring all these things level with respect to one another. And we, at the same time, we got to remember these gaps have to be virtually identical. Now that is no mean feat when you consider that the hinges on this car are complicated, the latches are complicated, and quite often by design they don't really last that long. Okay. So now we're dealing with something that's half a century old and it's worn out. Or this particular car was a race car at one time, so of course it had to put up with unmentionable indignities in some cases.
Right.
Sometimes doing walls and barrels that got in the way and things that it struck in its way.
So it seems like you've got the seams here looking pretty even.
Exactly.
Probably more than it would have been a new.
Exactly. So now we're going to start the longboard process wherein firstly he'll touch it with a longboard which is sometimes as long as 3 feet. Okay. That's how you keep that continuity over a long distance. You can't create continuity with a block that long, and I see this all the time. Okay. They got a little tiny sanding block. Well, it's only going to true the areas that it covers. If I want this to be the same as that, I got to have a big long sanding block. Okay. My visual reference has to be much longer in order for this car to be really straight. And the way, again, that you can judge these cars, irrespective of which ones they are or where they are, is get down on your knees and look down the side of the car. And if you don't see any waves and you don't see the door inward or outward, then that was probably
you can see that.
Well done. It could have either been a good car to start with, or it could have been a really good body man.
I see.
They don't always start out that way. The first time that I sent my Cobra to a body man back in the early 70s, I said, well, what do you think of the car? Because he didn't walked around the body and he'd seen it. And he was a very talented elderly guy, a very, very talented guy. And I said, what do you think of it? Because he was going to be helping me with the body work. And he said, well, kid, if you really want to know what I think, and I said, yeah, I really do. And he said, looks like a sack of nuts. Well, you don't need to be a body guy to know that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing.
Right.
And a lot of them are like that. And of course, metal cars, whenever it gets struck, of course, it keeps that. Right. Fiberglass cars will prevent some of that from lasting because they are, elastic in their nature. We talked about that with the Roadster. So it'll take a lot of beating, but if the body is hit hard enough, it actually is worse. So it can actually shatter and even blow up.
Wow.
All right, and I've been personally witness to that. But so it is a really good car in a lot of regards, but originally there wasn't a very high standard, so now we're having to bring it up to today's standards, and we're having to do a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily be present if this was like 25 years ago or something.
So at this point, just to kind of go over something we covered earlier, you put all the extra trim on the car to line it up. Now you've taken it off so you can get at it to sand it.
And that was part of our original assessment, was the car was a pretty good car, but it didn't have any trim on it. It didn't have a windshield on it. It didn't have the doors on it. Right. So we really had no idea how many problems it really had. So now when we have to reconstruct the car, okay, we have to physically put it back together in order to know if the doors fit properly, if the deck lid fits properly, where do the fenders lie with respect to the door. Right. There are a million little relationships that have to be attended to, but you can't do that if the trim is not on the car.
Gotcha. Now, where are the deck lid and trunk lid right now?
The deck lid and trunk lid, the inside of them is sitting over there, and they're pretty much done because they're going to get covered with insulation, so we're not going to spend a lot of time or effort getting them perfect because they're going to be covered and there's no point to it. They're really nice condition, but there's no point in doing a lot of fine body work on something that's never going to be seen again.
Sure. Okay.
We want to spend our time and our effort on the exterior of the body, the top, the deck lid, and the hood, because those are going to be in plain view.
All right. Do you happen to know what color this is going to end up?
The car's going to be black.
Okay.
So the standard on a black car is about 2 clicks up from everything else. The only thing that's harder to do is a silver car.
Now, why is a black car difficult?
Well, because the black allows the human eye to pick up on any discrepancy, and that it would seem to be just the opposite. But in fact, whenever the light strikes it, you'll notice that, for instance, if this light is reflected off of this car on a black surface, if there's the slightest little ripple, it'll accentuate that light, and it shows its problems more prominently. Wherein if it's a light-colored car, the light is absorbed by the car, and so you're not aware of all these little nuances that aren't very good.
Interesting.
In a black car, nothing is out of your sight.
So
because
it's a really high test to see if
it's a very high test in terms of the bodywork, and Corvettes, by their very nature, are lumpy.
Okay.
And so you got to get rid of all that. We got to actually redesign the body in effect in order to have the desired result. There's no apologizing on a black car. It's either perfect or it's not. Okay. Like a friend of mine said, it's either a #1 car, pause for effect, or it's not.
Yeah.
And see, black cars can never escape that #1 rating because they show all of their problems very prominently, and you don't have to be a body guy to see them.
Interesting.
They jump out and smack you in the head. So if you notice this particular product that we're using, we like a lot. We're only going to be putting on about 1/16 of an inch.
You say it's a glaze? Is that what
Yeah, it is. It's a finishing glaze. It has to be put on with a squeegee. It takes a really talented guy to do it in such a way that you don't add lumpiness and add work to it. So Oscar's been doing this a long time, and this is the first time I've ever seen cover the entire car.
Okay.
Because if you don't create another line out here that you can manipulate down to be virtually perfect, you really can't get a good black paint job on, or any dark color for that matter.
I see. Okay.
It makes it very difficult. And these cars at a distance look good, but when you paint them black, everything shows up. All the problems that you could get away with on a white car or a lighter colored car are not possible in a black car.
Okay.
It just jumps right out at you. And of course, the owner, he's going to give this to his wife. The last thing he needs to tell her is, honey, there's good news and there's bad news.
Sorry about the waves in the paint.
Sorry about the car. There's a beautiful car, but it's got waves all over it. You know, that's probably not going to go down well.
No.
Okay.
Very
So
good.
that's why we're doing it that way.
Well, thanks, JB.
You bet.
Appreciate it. It's a good update.
Yes.